Welcome everyone to Let's Talk About Sailcare. I'm here with Ervin Grove and Ridgely Mackenzie, and we're here to tell you a little bit about some tips on both installing and uninstalling sails, taking care of your sails, folding your sails, and storing your sails for the winter. I have Ervin Grove. Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself, Ervin?
Hey, Austin, thanks. Yeah, my name's Ervin Grove. I'm the service manager down here in Charleston, South Carolina. I've been sailing all my life, and I've been working with the North Group in some capacity for the past 7 years. And I'm a new dad, so that's great.
Awesome. And we also have Ridgely Mackenzie, who is the service manager in the North Sails Annapolis loft. He's actually a third generation sailmaker, and he was second place at the 2017 J111 Worlds. And then I also work out of the same loft, just on the sail side, and I'm focusing both on big boats and one design. Today we're going to be talking about some general common sail handling mistakes, some tips to take on and off your sails safely, proper sail care and storage, and then the big question of when do I need service. And then finally, we'll take some questions at the end. Ridgely, can you go ahead and get into the common sail handling mistakes that you see?
Kind of one of the most common issues that we see is sails not being flaked. The toughest thing with that is sometimes it's hard to flake your sail on the boat, and we'll kind of get into that in a little bit. Making sure you kind of do the more proper on-water repairs is a good thing. Is when you're dealing with a small tear on the boat, just know that it's not going to be the best repair that you could do, and know that it most likely should come into the loft after experiencing some damage on the water.
Gotcha. And when you come out to the marina and you see, like, if you were to put away your boat, you had, let's say, just a cruising boat, how would you secure the, like a furling headsail, and what would you do to make sure that your sails are going to look the same when you come back to the boat in a week after, say a storm or something like that? What do you do with the furling line? What do you do with the sail cover and all sorts of things like that?
So when you're leaving the boat, if you have a furling head sail, you make sure the UV cover, the sacrificial cover, is protecting the whole sail. One way to do that is, one, check the sail, make sure that the cover is on the right side. It's on the exposed side when furling. If it's not, the drum is wound the wrong way.
How do you tell, Ridgely, that the UV cover is on the correct side? I mean, obviously it's pretty easy with a colored sail cover, but is there any tips or tricks for if the sail has like a white UV cover?
So with North Sails, we put sunny side stickers on, so indicating which side the UV cover is on. Otherwise, if you don't have one of those stickers on your sails, one of the best ways is to look at both sides of the sail and determine which side looks like the rest of the sail. So if it's a Dacron sail and you have a white UV cover, it's going to look pretty identical. When you look at the sail, one side's going to have a UV cover, one side's not. The side that doesn't is going to be the Dacron, and you look to make sure the Dacron is the same as the rest of the sail. So that's probably the best way. Feel and visuals.
Okay. And Ervin, I'm going to bring you in here for a second. One thing we see a lot is sails that rip when they're flogging. Is there anything that people can do out there to help minimize their flogging, both when raising and lowering the sails, and then also in maneuvers? And maybe we'll gear it a little bit more towards a cruising answer, because you guys deal with a lot of cruising boats down there in Charleston.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that, you always, whenever you hear a little flutter on the back of the head sail or the main, you can always use your leech line to tighten that up a little bit. Always make sure that you have proper sheet tension, the sails tight enough. And if you're overpowered, you can simply shorten sail to get the boat upright a little bit more. But, peek down from the low side, look at the leech. If your leech is moving, then you're potentially causing some undue damage to the back of the sail. The leeches are typically what take the most wear. And I think that that's something that, when we're sailing upwind, we're usually looking at the front of the sail, keeping an eye on the telltales, And if we're not looking at the sail as a whole, we can sometimes not exactly take advantage of the whole foil.
And I think one final thing that I see generally is if you can, it's not always possible, but if you can turn either away from the wind or closer to downwind when furling, like say a Genoa, that's always going to help taking the load off the rig as well. Obviously, we can't drop our main going downwind, but at least when furling headsails and doing maneuvers, I think trying to turn a little bit away from the wind when you're cruising, helps improve the lives of the sails. And then finally, I know you guys have had to have seen some crazy on the water repairs that you're then fixing permanently once it makes it into the shop. Do either of you guys have any cool stories about the coolest repair that you've ever seen from on the water?
I've had guys that have taped entire spinnakers together with sticky back, and it's remarkable that they've flown them. Again, this is not something that I would advise as a permanent solution, but you get these things back into the loft, and it's a work of art with sticky back, especially for ocean racers that are spending a lot of time out there on the water.
What about you, Ridgely?
Well, we actually just had one in earlier today that was quite interesting. There was a lot of duct tape on the sail, almost the entire foot of the sail, and it was a 150% Genoa, was covered in duct tape. So that one,
So
that was very clever and resourceful there.
Yeah, so if you were to do an on-the-water repair and you have, obviously if you have sail tape, that's probably the best solution. But if someone doesn't have sail tape, is doing duct tape, is that okay? Is that going to permanently damage the sail, or should they try and find other means of making that sail come back together?
I would suggest do whatever you can to not use duct tape. When peeling the duct tape, it stretches the sail. The adhesive's so strong on duct tape that it can really stretch the sail, and or if it's a laminate sail, start pulling up the laminate.
Mm-hmm.
And just in general, the residue gets left everywhere.
Yeah. And one thing that we've heard recently is people using 5200 like on sails, especially when they're offshore. Do you guys steer people away from that, or is that you think that's better than maybe using duct tape, is like some 5200 and Dacron sail material?
I think we can hit a little bit more on that type of construction and sail repair later on. It's been an interesting new concept in using something with a high shear strength to repair a sail. But I think that if you can limit the use of the damaged sail while underway, that's the best case scenario. And,
okay.
Figuring out the load path of the sail and repairing it on the water can sometimes be a little bit more dicey than what we can manage in the loft on the floor.
Gotcha. So when people are taking off their sails and putting their sails on, there's obviously a lot of things that can happen. You can, have a jam with the furler. You can have the sail fly into the piling and rip in half. When you guys take sails on and off, which is a service that you guys do all the time, what are you looking to do? What kind of procedure do you take to make sure that you're not going to damage these sails in any way when you're putting the sails on and off of a boat? Ervin,
yes.
Did you talk on that one?
Yeah, so Austin, it's funny, like every Sunday night, I usually look at the weather for the week and I figure out which days are going to be my good work days out on the water. I think that order operations and a little bit of careful planning can simplify your life greatly, especially as the size of boat increases. Typically, I find my best day and my best window. And then once I go out to the boat, I take a look at the boat. And if I have a team member with me, we look at the boat and we kind of talk about the wind direction and what the least amount of moves we can use with the sail are in order to get our sail bent onto the boat. Obviously, as we're attaching the sail, we're always checking all of our corner attachments. Some of our cruisers like to use either seizing wire or zip ties on the shackles of their sails at the head and at the tack. I always kind of encourage zip ties over seizing wire because if you need to get them off quickly, you can. And if you're leaving your sails up so long that the zip ties and the plastic are going to turn to dust, then you're leaving your sails on too long without checking on them. Basically, what we do at the loft with all of our head sails, typically when they leave the loft, they've got what we call an LP flake, and we can discuss that a little bit further down the road. An LP flake helps stack the luff. So the luff is already set up right at the forward edge, especially for hoisting head sails. It makes it so much more simple to get the luff tape up the groove of the sail. So as soon as I get to the boat, we have a small discussion. We figure out the least amount of moves we can use in order to get the sail from the dock cart up onto the boat. Typically, when you get your sail back from a North Sails loft, we're going to get the clue will be on the outside of the roll. So if you have a head sail, the idea is that you can take a halyard, you can drop the head sail right there at the base of the mast and roll it forward. This helps simplify the least amount of moves that you need to make. Can we switch back to that last slide there, Austin?
Yep. Yep. And for the LP slide?
And I think, you know, yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. So I think as far as your head sails go, that helps quite a bit. Obviously, with mainsails, we're going to get all of our pins ready if we're going to be reinstalling on a track slide or something like that. And we're wanting to make sure that our luff car handling system for our mainsail is ready to go. We're obviously checking all those things in the loft, and they're already sorted. But the reinstall, you want to be able to hoist some of the mainsail up typically, and then install the rest of them and get the flake underneath as you drop the rest of the sail back down.
Just to clarify, so a good weather day, what do you call a good weather day? What conditions is someone looking for?
Good weather day is under 5 knots. So let me take that back. A good weather day is under 10 knots in a favorable wind direction. A great weather day is under 5 knots and not 95 degrees and 100% humidity in Charleston, South Carolina.
Okay, and then finally, you mentioned the LP flake earlier. Could you just briefly explain to everyone listening how, if they wanted to do that themselves, say if there's a yard near the marina where they could get these sails ready to go up, how they would go about doing an LP flake?
Yeah, sure. So the picture you're looking at, Ridgely's down there on the bottom right, and Will Bomar is on the left. Basically what we're doing is Will Bomar, the fellow in the white shirt there, he's folding the luff of the sail, or the tack of the sail, up to where the luff tape is perpendicular. This is called the LP of the sail. It's the luff perpendicular. It's a 90% line, or a 90-degree angle from the clew to the luff. And when you fold this up, just like he's done in the photo, it promotes the sail walking towards that end of the sail and stacking all of your luff tape right at the forward edge of the sail. This helps greatly when you go to hoist on the boat.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. And as we go forward, obviously not all sails are traditional sails. We now have different systems like in-mast furling and in-boom furling. Is there anything special that you do there, Ridgely, to get set up for an in-mast or an in-boom furling installation?
Well, pretty much look for that same weather window that you would for any installation. There are a couple different steps. As you see here, the picture on the left is an in-mast, and the picture in the center is a in-boom. So when doing the in-mast, first you want to make sure you have the battens, the shackles and the hardware are in the mast or on the sail. Make sure the outhauls run, and make sure the breeze, with any luck, is forward of the beam. Then I typically start by hooking the head of the sail up. So you're going to have, on most of these, you have to take an inspection plate off. And when you remove the inspection plate, you'll see a head swivel that's around a foil that's going up your mast. And you'll have to undo the shackle and attach the head, reattach the shackle. One of the tricks here is people often drop the screws or the shackles in the mast and are unable to get them out. So what I like
Have you
to
ever
do,
done that? Have you ever done that?
fortunately, I actually have never done that. And now that I've said that, I probably will the next boat I go to.
Yeah.
So what I like to do is I take a piece of hand sewing thread or a small line and tie it very tightly around the shackle, and then tie it to something outside of the mast. So that way, if it were to fall, it's staying attached and I can just pull it right back up.
Good
So
tip.
then
I wish I had
after,
done that.
so after the head's attached, I like to attach the clew, run the outhaul line through the clew block, and then reattach that back to the clew car.
Mm-hmm.
Once that's all set, I like to make sure the battens, if there are battens for the mast roller furling main, I like to make sure they're installed, and then I go straight into a hoist. Once I have the sail all the way up, I bring it to max hoist, and then I lower it just a little bit in order to slide the webbing around either the shackle or they have a hook sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I find it easier to do that when the sail's vertical. Obviously, if it's blowing 15, it might be easier to do that before putting the sail in there.
Okay. What about with an in-boom sail? Are you know, I've seen a lot of people do it different ways. Some people try and hoist, I've seen people try and hoist the sail and put the battens in and then furl it into the boom. Or are you one of those guys that prefer laying it out on the deck, hooking the foot up, and then just kind of cranking it into the boom from completely on the deck without having to raise it up?
So I think you should only do it from the deck when the wind is aft of the beam. If the wind's above 10 knots and it's aft of the beam, it's really difficult to get a proper furl. Even in the leisure furl guide, it asks you not to store the sail when the wind's after the beam. So what I like to do is pretty much the same order of operations as any other sail. You start with making sure you have the battens and all your equipment's there. Often on the in-boom mains, there's a bolt rope on the foot of the sail, and you'll slide the bolt rope into a small track in the boom. Once that's done, I tie the tack and the clew, making sure that they have the proper tensions there. Then I go ahead and load the battens. Once the battens are loaded, I go straight into a hoist. So I like to load everything prior to putting the sail up. I think it just makes for an easier, safer hoist.
Okay.
Awesome. Once it's up, we furl the sail. Actually, they're one of my more favorite jobs to do.
Okay. So moving after we've got our sails on and off, and we've sailed a whole season, and we're getting ready to either, I know at least us in Maryland, we have a winter. We're not all as lucky as you, Ervin. So I'm probably going to leave this one a little bit closer to Ridgely, but I'll hit on this with you too, Ervin. How often should people take their sails off, and what's the best way to store them? Either say for the week that you're hauled out to redo your bottom in Charleston, or the 3 or 4 month winter that we have in Annapolis.
So I am a firm believer, if at all possible, if you're going to go away from your boat for over a month, it's a good idea to at least take your roller furling head sail down to get it out of the sun. Now I understand that is not necessarily an option for most people. So I like to suggest at least every winter, removing the sails physically off the boat and out of the elements. Just getting them into some sort of storage would be better than leaving them on the boat, especially if you're not going to use your boat at all during the winter. Definitely take your sails off the boat, any furling head sail off the boat before you have your boat hauled out for an extended period of time. That's just a good practice in general. I know here a lot of marinas don't allow you to have your boat hauled when you have a furling head sail installed on the boat.
Yeah, and that's important too, right? Because a lot of yards, if you wait till after the boat's hauled and they were to let you haul out with the sail on, you then aren't allowed to take the sail down on the lip or on the jack stands, right? You got to get it off ahead of time.
That can be pretty frowned upon.
Down in Charleston, it sounds like you guys sail year round. how often are you seeing clients take their sails off for a service? Even if it's good weather.
So Austin, it's funny you say that. I started my sailmaking career up in Rhode Island, and we have this great seasonality, and it gives you a really good opportunity to serve cruising clients well. You get a lot of preventative maintenance, and you get people's sails ready for the season, and then you don't see them. We don't quite have that luxury in Charleston. People typically leave their sails up year round in these warmer climates. And because of that, we do see a little bit more harsh UV damage, and that's to be expected. But you do always want to have access to your boat as well. I always my seasonality, for lack of a better term, would be hurricane season. And I think that it's always a wise idea to take the sails off during hurricane season. Your first named storm that you really think is going to be a problem, if you call me when it's within a day's fall, it's too late. We're already trying to prep our own homes, our own boats, our own everything for storage. I think it's something that you need to take a little bit more advanced warning on, and a little bit evaluate your calculated risk. But I think that getting the sails in the loft once a year is great practice. That's excellent. If you're getting your sails in once every other year, that would be kind of a minimum suggestion, especially for our cruising clients. I think the sun can really do a number to your sails, and depending how much you're using the boat, that it's just a really good practice to have some experts look at the stitching. And usually, if we get a sail in that we can re-stitch the cover on rather than replace the cover because it's come unfurled from the sail and the sunbrella is flapped in the wind, we've saved someone a significant amount of money by further prolonging the life of their UV protection.
Okay, so it sounds like your car preventative maintenance helps with later on large bills that could happen from, say a small tear becoming a large tear.
Absolutely. Small tears become big problems.
And Ridgely and Annapolis, we have that seasonality that Ervin mentioned earlier, but some people don't always store their sails in a sail loft. Where is a good place to store them, both in terms of maybe location in your typical house or garage, and what temperature is okay to store the sails at?
Well, I think ideally the best place to store your sails would be in some sort of temperature controlled climate, whether it be in your house, in the sail loft. I don't think leaving the sails down below is necessarily the best practice for storage, because you can see all sorts of things that come out of that, from rodents running along your dock lines, getting into your boat, to unforeseen leaks in your boat that have now caused water damage or stains to your sails that were stored down below. Ultimately, you want them in what I would say a room temperature environment inside. That would be the best place.
Would you say, flaked or rolled, or does it depend on the type of boat and the type of sail that you're storing?
I mean, ideally, rolling every sail would be great. Some sails, storing them rolled. If you fold a rolled sail, you've just defeated the purpose of rolling the sail. Mm-hmm. So I would say kind of a under 30-foot boat would be a good range to try and keep your sails rolled at all times. It's not necessarily possible, so we get that. But definitely a proper flake, and kind of touching back into the LP flake for the head sails, that just makes life so much easier when you get to put your sails on it come springtime. Gotcha. And flaking a sail, like just your main sail over your boom, that's a good way to do that.
And Ervin, we see a lot of sails now with cables and spinnakers on furlers and spinnakers and stocks. Is there anything in particular you would do with that type of sail, say a spinnaker on a top-down furler or a code 0 on a cable? Would you leave them furled, or do you recommend taking like a spinnaker off the cable and flaking it? Where do you think the best way to prolong the life of your sail is to store it?
So flaking sales is always going to be the best practice. However, there is a reality in this world, and I think that these cabled sails are terrific for ease of use. And if we've defeated the purpose of you having ease of use to your downwind sails, then we've defeated the purpose of cabling the sail to begin with. I always encourage owners to use their best judgment on how they want to handle their spinnakers or code zeros. And I am a firm believer that if you are going to be uncabling spinnakers or code zeros, it's probably best to get a professional involved. Tensioning those sails when they're not on the boat, or tensioning them and taking them down on the boat when they're unfurled can sometimes be a little bit more of a bear than what you sign up for. And you also run the risk of having cables and furling gear flying around in the breeze if you're doing it on the boat. So is it best to flake it? Probably. Is it possible always? Not necessarily, but if it can be, you know, and if you know you're going to be storing your race boat for 2 years, absolutely worth it.
Okay. And then going into the flaking tips, I know it's always the big battle at either the end of the day or the end of the winter watching. You know, sometimes some people try and struggle to flake a sail. Do you guys have any tips when you're teaching customers on technique for flaking in terms of, you know, how to get it to correctly fold down into a small area?
So the picture on the right side, you can see these guys. This is in our Palma loft, I believe. They're pulling against each other very, very hard. It's super important that you pull against each other and you get a crisp flake, or else you're going to have wrinkles midway up the flake. We want to avoid as many wrinkles as possible when we're flaking the sail. We want to have crisp, clean flakes that extend the full length of the foot. And pulling against your partner is going to be the best way to do that.
What about the roll at the end? Do you roll towards the clue or towards the tack? Or do you have a preferred way of having that consistent?
I always try to flake towards the tack.
Yeah.
Are you referring to flakes or rolls?
Like, so when you're done flaking and then you go to roll the sail up at the end, do you always roll from the tack to the clue or to the clue to the tack once you finish flaking?
Usually the luff is always stacked, so i.e. the tack, and
Yeah.
I always roll from the tack to the clue. And a pro tip from all you guys out there that are getting your sails back from the lofts and launching boats, typically, general rule of thumb, all North sails typically roll from the tack to the clue. So when you go put your sails on the boat, start at the clue end when you start unrolling the sail.
Good to know. And then as we go forward, rolling types, Ridge, a lot of people ask how to either fit a one design sail in a box. You know, we usually ship these in about 8 foot long kind of tube boxes. What's the procedure for getting both a main and then say a smaller jib into that box?
So on the left side there, you have Jackson Benvenuti, who's prepping a sail to be tri-folded and go into a one design box. So one of the couple of big things to watch out for, you never want to fold a vision window. Just never want to put a crease in that. That makes the window significantly weaker. So kind of what you just touched on, it's about an 8 foot length that you want the sail. So you fold the sail, trying to stack the luff and keep it in an 8 foot length. Then once you have that, you roll from the luff to the leech and you're rolling that folded sail together. That's how you'll get that to fit into a one design box. You're also going to have to make sure you remove all the battens from the sail.
Okay, good to know. And then here on the right, we have a jib with battens, and you would just roll the direction down the leech to kind of get the battens to stack on top of each other. Is that how you would do it?
Yes, and I think with this sail, it's good to mention that alternating the rolls is a good practice, especially when storing. If you know you stored your sail with it rolled to the port side last time, well, roll it to the starboard side next time you store it. That way you'll not get the memory that's in this sail, as you can see at the head.
Okay. What are some things that we see from improper storage? Is it, we have all these pictures here. I'll let you talk about what happened in any of these scenarios.
So we'll start with the center photo. This sail is just the common case of sail was never taken down until it was absolutely necessary. So this sail, my guess is it stayed up for a minimum of 2 years. You can see where the stitching is completely gone or almost completely gone on the UV cover, causing some of the heftier repairs to actually get this thing back together in sailing shape. So that one's the reminder to take the sails down seasonally. The one to the right is one that was stored very well. They rolled the sail, but they left the sail in the boat. The sail stayed in the boat. The luff was right up against the mast, and water was raining down through the mast boot, and that's where that large grease stain came from. So definitely want to try and keep your sails out of your boat and in your house or somewhere safe from rodents and water damage. The one on the left, that sail was stored in excessive heat. So you can see where the seam is actually just kind of split apart itself. Don't want to store your sails in excessive heat and humidity. That's what will happen to the non-sewn seams. And
then here, I think we've all been to a marina after a good hurricane and seen this picture over here. That one's going to be fun to take down. I think we can deduce for ourselves what happened there. And then what do we have in these two right photos?
So the center photo here is it's evidence of not storing your sail with the main sail cover on all the time. You can see the triangles that are formed in the discoloration, and that's what we refer to in the sail loft as UV triangles. That's just from specifically storing the sail. Looks to be very well flaked on the boom just without a sail cover. All those gray dots in that sail are also mildew. So that sail got stored in humidity, never really got to dry out, and started to mildew. You don't want your sails looking like that.
And what about the one on the right?
The one on the right is the UV cover. The sail was not furled with the UV cover the right way. So right there along that seam where it's split is the edge of the UV cover, and the sail is now torn from UV damage on that hinge point.
Not good.
Austin, I think it's worth noting. I think it's worth noting that we'll have to take that one on the left off with probably a knife, and we don't like to do that if we can help it.
Yeah. As much, it's not fun going up a mast. Or anything.
No, never fun to cut a sail.
So we briefly touched on service period earlier. I think mainly I was just going to go ahead and ask Ridge, is there, we talk about once a year, is there anything throughout the year that people should look for, mainly kind of on their cruising sails, that might say, okay, maybe I need to bring my sail in a bit earlier than the winter this year to prevent something big from happening?
Yeah, so a couple things to look for is discoloration in your sails. If you see them yellowing or really any sort of discoloration, that's a good sign that the sail should come into the loft. Typically means there's either UV damage or something else going on with the sail. Another thing is to check the stitching. If you see broken stitching, should come in for a restitch. I mean, you can find broken stitching anywhere in the sail most often. So definitely look in your corner patches, your attachment points, your sacrificial covers for broken stitching. If you see chafe marks along the foot or the leech of your Genoa, probably should come in for some surfacing as well.
Okay. So here we got a nice picture of a guy hand sewing some cleats back on. Do you open up your pockets when you get to customers' boats as well and check inside of there? Should people look inside of all the pockets and all the different leech lines and different systems on the entirety of their mainsail too, not just the clew stitching?
I think it's definitely important to check your leash lines, make sure there's stopper knots before they run through the cleat. That's definitely one good thing. Make sure that they've not chafed away or the leash line itself hasn't started to rot. But yes, we always open up all the pockets to ensure that everything's working properly.
Yeah, and this was just one other picture to show similar things to look for. So you hit on sun damage, stitching. What about sails that are becoming hard to furl, or what's happening there? Or is that, a furling system issue? Is it a sail issue? Is it both?
It can be a little bit of both. Sometimes when you have like a in-mast roller furling main, and that starts to becoming harder and harder to furl, the sail might be a little too deep and too much of a belly to suck into the mast. So you're trying to really force a lot of shape in there.
Mm-hmm.
That will cause it to be harder to furl, which we can change the shape of the sail by either doing a luff curve change or doing what we would call moon pies in the mainsail broad seams.
Okay, so they can fix it without having to totally get a new sail sometimes.
Yes, exactly.
And then what do we have in these two photos real quick before you?
One on the left is a sun damage. You can see there's a lot of what we would call bullet holes where stitching used to be, and there is not anymore. The head webs there they have a cover over top of them, and that cover is chafed away and sun rotten itself away. That would be a perfect candidate to invest redoing the corner attachments and restitching the UV cover. Then sail on the right appears to be some delamination.
So they should get that in pretty quickly then, I would guess.
Yeah, if you start noticing anything that looks like that sail on the right, get it in immediately.
Okay. And then obviously at North, we have our 3DI technology, and these sails are constructed quite a bit differently than your normal Dacron that probably a lot of people are used to taking care of. Ervin, can you get into the specifics of how someone should care for their 3DI sail over its entire life cycle?
So our 3DI product is really incredible. Since we've started with this 3DI stuff, we just don't repair as many upwind sails. It just doesn't happen because the sails are so durable and so robust. As far as best practices go for 3DI, it's like any other sail. Store them in a dry, temperature-controlled climate. The lower the temperature, if you do store it in a hot temperature, you're susceptible to sail shrinkage, and a lot of these sails tend to be race sails, so we want to avoid that. We always want to clean the sail off with fresh water, give it a rinse. And I do have a lot of people that ask, especially the guys that are buying our 3DI Ocean, our 3DI Nordac, some of our 3DI Endurance clients, they're asking for onboard sail repair kits. And typically what I tell them is, hey, look, you've bought the best product. We don't stitch this product. It comes in a solid blank, and we simply finish the sail. It's one composite structure. So you're at an advantage because you don't have any panels that are sewn together, and the sail is just gonna hold its shape. It's gonna last longer than what any other competitor can offer you. Typically what I do is I give someone a spreader dot about that big, and what I do is I say, if it's bigger than that, you need to come see me. As far as our repairs go for 3DI, we've kind of learned how to repair this. We haven't had to repair many of them, but we've learned how to repair these sails by doing recuts for big race boats. So for an example, during J-class worlds, all the J-class boats moved their head stays forward. That caused none of the head sails to fit anymore. So we had to recut the tack boxes out of the corner of the sail. Austin, can you draw a line on the tack box of that sail for our people viewing today? So basically what we did is we sliced out the tack box, and then we molded in a piece of what we call 3DI 5-ply. It's a proprietary product, and it's what we use when we're trying to repair a sail or we're trying to change the geometry of a sail. So we molded a piece in the middle of the foot, and we molded a wedge along the luff of the sail, and voila, all of the J-class head sails were able to fit their new rig dimensions. It's kind of a testimony to what we can do with this 3DI material. We use a super strong glue in the loft. We actually, we either put sandbags when we're curing the sail with this 5-ply material, or we can even staple the sail to the floor, and we don't have to stitch the sail afterwards because the shear strength of the glue that we're using is so strong that you simply don't need it anymore. The stitching doesn't do anything for the strength of the joint of the sail. Again, to kind of touch on the 3DI specific Sailcare, I think that I saw in the chat that someone had asked if we need to roll 3DI. I think that it's a great practice. You're not going to get a hard edge. It's not necessary because we no longer have plastic films in the sails. So you're not going to get a delamination problem with 3DI. We actually guarantee it now, which is amazing to be able to say that as a representative of the product. So I think that as far as 3DI specific Sailcare, the sails are pretty durable compared to anything else we've ever seen. And as far as temporary repair material, sure, have a spreader dot ready, and if something's chafing, slap it on there and bring it to the loft, and we can kind of talk about the best plan of action for it.
Gotcha. And as you talk about the services you guys do offer, just if people are curious, I know everyone knows you do, sail repairs, but a lot of people don't know about some of the other stuff, services you might offer. Can you hit on that briefly?
Yeah, I mean, we offer many services from cleaning, repairs, obviously, sail delivery, sail pickup. That's, Ervin, do you guys do anything further down?
So we also offer a McLube sail coat treatment, and it helps with mildew on sails. I think this is probably something that's more in line with a Spectra type sail. It helps with mildew. I think that's something we offer, and of course we offer the full service sail care. If you don't want to go out to your boat, we talked about bending sails on and off. Don't want to go out to your boat and bend sails off and worry about that, call us. We're happy to come out and help.
Awesome. And so now I'm going to go ahead and open it up to the chat box. We already have a few questions in there, so just bear with me for 1 second. I see Ervin already answered the question about rolling or flaking the 3DI sails. Someone asked, why is temp important for sail storage? He says, I can avoid understanding the damp, but what's wrong with cold if the sail isn't being folded and unfolded? So mainly, can I store my sail in colder climates as long as it's not, hot climates, essentially? Cold and dry is what he's getting at.
I think ideally, if possible, you would store it not in a colder climate. But what it does promote, what storing a sail in colder climates does is promote shrinkage to the sail. If it's a laminate sail, it can start to cause the delamination process. But ultimately, with a Dacron sail, storing it in a colder climate is not going to be the end of the world for you.
So David Bennett wants to know, should I remove my battens when storing my sails?
Absolutely. That's part of it. I think you always want to pull the sail battens out, and it's going to help create a smaller roll, a smaller flake, be it whatever. But I think that pulling the battens out and then going through the process of rebattening the sail at the beginning of every season is a good process, because again, sails shrink, battens don't shrink as quickly. And if you're retensioning them every season, you're much better off.
I think I'd like to just add to that for some of the racer guys out there that don't take their battens out, just make sure they're not tensioned. Detension them, pull the loops off the wingtips of the RBS battens, or release the Velcro just to relieve the tension put on the sail.
Okay. Dennis wants to know, how can I take care of my sails when cruising nonstop around the world? So here's the guy who's, he's probably every maybe 5th port or 10th port he pulls into, there's a sail off. So he's going to be doing a little bit of work on his own. What should he have in his repair kit, and how can he do preventative maintenance at all on his sails to keep getting around the world?
So I think, Dennis, you need to keep a close eye on your corner webbings, and you need to keep a close eye out for chafe when you're sailing. All the time you need to be looking for where the sail's chafing on anything, be it the bow pulpit, be it a spreader patch. That's going to be the weak points that show up on your sail. So always keep an eye out for that. Another thing I like to use as far as UV protection goes is whenever I'm looking at a sun cover, I call it the thumb test, and I just scratch with my thumb on a UV cover. And if I see the threads start to fray, then I know that we need to start thinking about restitching and replacing the thread in the UV cover. The UV fabrics last a really long time, and they're very, very good against sun damage, but the thread that attaches them sometimes sometimes it doesn't last quite as long. And I think it's really important that we keep a close eye on that, every 6 months or so. Obviously, whenever you're at a port with a loft, feel free to stop by. We'd love to hear about your trip.
And what would you have in your repair kit, Ervin, if you were going and you wanted to just to handle, the basic jobs? What would you have?
I would have a palm. I would have a needle and thread. I'd have about 6 feet of 1-inch tubular webbing. I'd have about 10 feet of 6-inch Insignia PSA. Insignia PSA is just a sticky back, is what it's more commonly referred to. It's just a sailcloth fabric. And I may consider, depending on kind of the inventory, if he has a little bit techier sails, I may get some a more high strength Technora PSA or something like that. I think that it's going to be minimal as to what your onboard repairs are doing. If you're cruising around the world, you are making stops periodically where you can get service and you can order cloth. And I often see these guys that get the Sailrite sewing machines, and they make their way around the world with their Sailrite sewing machines. And while I think those are great tools to have on board for building things and building sheet bags and fixing things, sometimes it can be just enough to make you dangerous.
Yeah, because a lot of times I guess you have to undo what's done, and
Yeah. And it comes in a very narrow straight stitch that takes a long time to undo.
We got a bunch of questions coming in. I'll do one final one, and then I'd like to just say, anyone who asked a question in the chat box to go ahead and email these guys with your specific questions. They'd love to answer it, and I'll have their emails up here in a second. But one final one: any tricks or suggestions for flaking the sail onto the boom after sailing? When you guys go and you sail with a customer and you're teaching them how to drop their sail and get the flakes trained in, what do you do? Is there anything they can do, or just drop it and let it fall?
So what I do is I like to have someone on the bow, and we get into a nice area in the harbor where we've got a lee shore that the breeze has decreased. And what I also like to do is, if you're sailing double-handed, one trick is a lot of your halyards are led back to a clutch bank right at your companionway. And a nice little trick I like to use is drop the main halyard down the companionway, and whoever's at the front of the mast that's alternating flakes with your slides, they can actually put their foot on the main halyard, and that way they can control the speed at which the main halyard is being dropped, and the person on the aft end, or the leech of the sail, can focus their full attention in making sure that they're pulling each flake against their partner at the mast that's controlling the speed of the drop.
Gotcha. And things like full battens and lazy jacks would help keep those sails, when cruising, at least keep those sails under control.
Absolutely. Lazy jacks are my favorite sail handling system. They're easy, and they're the most simple, most beautiful invention in my opinion for mainsail handling.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much, guys, for joining us. I'll leave this slide up for a couple of minutes just for everyone to get emails, and thanks for joining us.
Take care, everyone.